Hello, so today we are going to start with absolute value and order of operations. Some of this might be new to you and some might be a review. So it's important that you take notes. So on Google Classroom, you'll find this note sheet. You can either print it out or write it on a separate piece of paper. But we will go over these blanks in absolute value. These examples are what we'll do in class, so you don't have to worry about them yet. I would, though, either like on the back of this or on a separate piece of paper, write down the examples that we do in the PowerPoint because they're good notes. The second page is where you can fill in your blanks for the order of operations. And again, we will do these examples in class. So let's get started. So, absolute value and order of operations. Our objective for today is that you will be able to simplify expressions that include absolute value by using the order of operations. We'll do that warm up in class. So, absolute value. The absolute value is a number's distance from 0. So right here I wrote -3 is 3 units away from 0. So if we look at like a number line, we have 0, you have like 1, -1, -2, -3. So if we're at -3, it's 1, 2, 3 units away from 0. So it's not -3 units away, it's just 3 units away. So that's what we're looking at when we look at absolute value, is what the number's distance is from 0. So because of that, the absolute value is always positive. So the absolute value of -3 is +3. The absolute value of 5 is just 5 because it's still 5 units away from 0. And the absolute value of -6 is +6. So when you see a number in absolute value, the final number to come out is always positive. Now, sometimes you might have operations inside the absolute value. You want to do all your operations first before you make the numbers positive. So you want to do 2 minus 6 gives you -4. Then you do the absolute value of -4 is +4. So let's look at some examples. So we have the absolute value of -7. You just make it positive, so it's just 7. Here we're adding some, so you want to take your absolute value first. So you have the absolute value of -2 is +2. Copy down your plus sign. The absolute value of -11 is +11. So now we just do 2 plus 11 is 13. Over here we have the absolute value of 7 is 7. Copy down your negative sign. And then the absolute value of -8 is +8. So now we have 7 minus 8 is -1. Over here, this next problem is what I was just talking about on the previous slide, how you simplify inside the absolute value first. So we have 3 minus 9 gives us the absolute value of -6, and then you make it positive. So the absolute value of -6 is +6. -12 plus 1 is -11, and the absolute value of -11 is just +11. So next we're going to look at the order of operations. So the order of operations, it's like a set of rules to follow in order to simplify an expression. So we're always following PEMDAS, which you've probably heard before. So the P stands for parentheses. So you always simplify inside the parentheses first, but you also still want to follow the order of operations inside the parentheses. So if you have like 1 minus 2 times 3, you want to do that multiplication first before you subtract. Your E stands for exponents, so after you get rid of any parentheses, you want to do any exponents. Now next, we always group the M and the D together, so multiplication and division are grouped together. So you complete all multiplication and division in order from left to right. One doesn't come before the other, so if you could have like 6 times 2 divided by 4, you do this multiplication first and then you divide. Same thing, addition and subtraction are last. They're grouped together. You just go from left to right. So you could have 5 minus 2 plus 7. And you do the 5 minus 2 first, 3 plus 7, then you add. So let's look at some examples of this. So, order of operations. So the first thing I want to point out right here, this isn't parentheses, so you don't have to do this for, well, it is, but when there's not a bunch of numbers inside of it, it just means multiplication. So this is just like 8 times 2. So it could be written as 8.2, that's multiplication. It could be 8 times 2, or 8 times 2 like that. So that just means multiplication. There's multiple ways to write a multiplication problem. It's not considered parentheses for our PEMDAS. So I don't see any exponents either, so we're going to start with the multiplication and division from left to right. So the first one I see is this 48 divided by 8. So we have 12 minus 48 divided by 8 is 6, and copy everything else down. Next, we still have some multiplication. So we're going to do this negative 6 times 2. We get 12 minus 12 minus 1. And now we're going to do multiplication and division from left to right. So we're going to do 12 minus 12 is 0 minus 1. 0 minus 1 is just negative 1. So just go through each problem step by step following PEMDAS and you'll be fine. So right here I do see parentheses. But again, like I said before, you need to follow order of operations inside the parentheses. So this multiplication is going to come before this subtraction. So we're going to do 11 minus 4 times 3 is 12 squared plus 16 divided by 2 times 3. So we're going to finish up in the parentheses. So 11 minus 12 is negative 1. Negative 1 squared plus 16 divided by 2 times 3. Now I see an exponent right here, so negative 1 squared. So let's talk about, so when you have something squared, so like 2 squared, it's the number times itself that many times. So we have 2 times 2. 2 to the third would be 2 times 2 times 2. 2 to the fourth is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Like 3 squared is 3 times 3. So it's just the number times itself that many times. So in this case, negative 1 squared is negative 1 times negative 1. Now a negative times a negative is a positive, so we just get positive 1. So now we have 1 plus 16 divided by 2 times 3. Now we're up to multiplication and division from left to right. So we're going to start with this 16 divided by 2. So we have 1 plus 8 times 3. Now we're going to do that, we're going to do that multiplication. So we have 8 times 3 is 24. So I'm going to write it up here. So 1 plus 24. And then our final step, just add them together, you get 25. So it looks like a lot of work, but we're just going through each step of PEMDAS. Now this one looks a little shorter. So I don't see any parentheses. So we're going to start with this exponent. So as I said before, 2 to the fourth would be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So like 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 times 2. Then we get 8 times 2 is 16. So we have 11 plus 16 divided by 8 minus 12. Next, we're going to do any multiplication and division from left to right. So I see 16 divided by 8. 16 divided by 8 is 2. And then you do your addition and subtraction from left to right. So 11 plus 2 is 13 minus 12. And 13 minus 12 is just 1. Uh-oh, this one looks scary. So now we're adding in some fractions, or like a big division problem. So you can almost treat this like two separate problems. So we're going to simplify the top first and the bottom separately and then divide them out. So if we look at just 11 minus 8 squared plus 1, we're going to start in the parentheses. So 11 minus 8 is 3 squared plus 1. Then you're going to do the exponent. So 3 squared is 3 times 3 gives us 9 plus 1. And then 9 plus 1 is 10. So 10, this whole thing equals 10. Now over here we have 5 minus 5 times 2 for the bottom of this. You're going to start, there's no parentheses or exponents, so you're just going to start with your multiplication division from left to right. 5 times 2 is 10, so we get 5 minus 10. 5 minus 10 is just negative 5. So this whole bottom equals negative 5. So now you do the division of the whole thing because you simplified the top and you simplified the bottom. We're just left with 10 divided by negative 5, which is negative 2. So your final answer here is negative 2. So when you see a big fraction like that, don't get freaked out. Just treat the top and bottom as their own problems and then divide them out. So that is it for our examples today. Make sure you come to class with any questions you have, and we will review this and do some practice.